For too long, people in toxic relationships have been told to put up and shut up, to not be so needy, to not ask for so much, to not expect respect, to make compromise, to be the bigger person, to be more realistic, to try and understand the other person's point of view. Enough. This has to stop. The idea that relationships are compromise. The idea that relationships are compromise is a line that people love to throw around, especially when they're talking about longer-term committed marriages and certainly family. It's this concept that to be in a relationship means compromise. Notice that they aren't always using the word sacrifice. It's compromise. It kind of gets at making a concession. So both people kind of sort of get what they need. Both people making a concession. What's interesting, though, is compromise. When you think about using the word compromise, to compromise something can also mean lowering the quality of something, like compromising safety or compromising flavor. And it can also mean weakening something. For example, hiring someone who had a track record of bullying colleagues compromised the safety of the workplace. Compromise is a tricky word. But in the world of therapy and psychology and relationships, we view compromise as a good thing. You may give up something, and the other person may do the same, and it feels like you find a middle ground. You feel that when something matters, when you're in a relationship with someone, that the other person, you feel confident that they will compromise, and so over time you will also do the same, and again, repeated over many years, both people feel safe and seen and heard. And when it works, it's great. Micro and macro sacrifices do need to be made in relationships. And when it's mutual and reciprocal, it works. It may sting for a moment, but it works. Well, this whole compromise thing simply doesn't work in a narcissistic relationship. It's just not a thing. Narcissistic people approach relationships like hard-hitting antagonistic business negotiation, where someone wins and gets the better deal. And so in relationships, we'll see people with these personalities can be belligerent and aggressive, and above all, just like in that business deal, they have to win. Any concessions by the other person in the relationship are hard won, so it often doesn't feel like a compromise. It feels like a fight to the death over something as small as someone who's going to walk the dog in the rain, or what friends are we going to have over for dinner, or asking someone to cut their workout short and pick some groceries up on the way home. But couples therapists and many other therapists love the compromise word. And sadly, many people in narcissistic intimate relationship do end up in couples therapy as part of some form of hope meets last-ditch effort. And then that word compromise gets thrown around. Well, that kind of talk often gets weaponized by the narcissistic person, who will constantly tell you that if you don't do what they want, then you aren't compromising. And when you bring up the recent examples in the relationship, of the relationship not feeling like a two-way street, they're likely to gaslight and bring up stuff from the past and tell you that you're the one who's petty and ungrateful, and that they are going to tell the couples therapist this week how you don't compromise. Because the compromise word seems like it's some kind of golden ticket to making every relationship work. Lots of people who find themselves in narcissistic relationships and who are desperately trying to somehow make the relationship work will keep coming back to the idea that they are not compromising enough. If you ask for anything, you are the one who's being difficult in one of these relationships, or at least that's what you're told. Thus, simply just even voicing a basic need, want, emotion. Many people who find themselves in narcissistic relationships will frame that as though they are not compromising, and the word gets twisted. Over time, the narcissistic manipulation results in the person in the relationship, who's in the relationship with the narcissist, internalizing the sense that compromising is just another term for giving in and putting the other person's needs first, and ultimately subjugation. And then one day, compromise simply becomes self-abandonment, self-silencing. The fawn response, it becomes just a regular occurrence in the name of survival and safety. Disconnection from the self is the path to connection to the narcissist. The challenge is that many survivors of narcissistic relationships can believe that the shutting down of the self and the becoming what the narcissistic person demands and the abandonment of your own aspiration, need, feeling, and ultimately self is compromise. And I understand why that is. When you do that, and the desire to stay connected to the narcissistic person is often the driver of this. But when you do this, you basically reflexively, almost unconsciously capitulate and give in. The relationship works, whatever works means. Conflict, the levels of conflict may drop. The narcissistic person may be less surly because they're getting their way. They'll still be surly. That never goes away. And if the relationship sort of feels like it works better, it's easy to equate self-abandonment with compromise. Compromise, when done right, is reciprocal and mutual. I will pick up the kids every day this week because you have a deadline. And I will schedule my afternoon appointments from this week to next week. Or I understand that you can't text me back during the workday, and so your partner agrees to have a touch base the night before, so you guys are on the same page. You may have to skip your mother's birthday party because of a prior commitment, but you offer to take on the hosting duties of a family dinner the next month and bring everyone together. Compromise. It's a two-way street. When it's done right, it just feels like the stuff of connection. But in the narcissistic relationship, the slow descent into fully cutting off from yourself and living in a numb, detached state, well, that may mean you don't question what is happening. You don't take the fight. You don't question the gaslighting. You succumb to the exhaustion and the unreasonable rules of engagement, and the world is ready to throw you a compromise parade. You don't do this because you're codependent. You don't do this because you're weak or because you don't know how to be in a relationship. You do this to survive, to keep a family afloat, to have a place in a family. Your body simultaneously senses that the relationship is not safe, but at the same time, to push back and exert yourself and voice your needs also feels unsafe. Narcissistic relationships in this way are a perpetual catch-22. But it's not compromise. Self-abandonment is not the same thing as compromise. And sadly, we have sold people, especially women, a mantra of self-abandonment for most of human histories. There are love songs out there that have ridiculous lyrics like, "We have become one." I mean, really? Not healthy. It is only recently that we are not only understanding how narcissism operates in relationships, but also what happens to our nervous systems, emotional functioning, and sense of self when we have to attach to someone who is not safe and has no consideration for us whatsoever. And while we may have martyred and praised generations of people who have stoically and probably quite numbly kept soldiering through their responsibilities without a complaint, that has to stop. No one should be cheered on for abandoning themselves in the name of keeping a one-sided relationship going. Instead, people in these circumstances need to be supported and validated so they can slowly find their way back to themselves, their true selves. This is why we need words for this, and to stop using simple prescriptions for compromise, when that ship likely sailed long ago in most narcissistic relationships. That's why we need to understand the patterns of narcissistic relationships and to understand that they are different, and to stop using the same tired old advice to guide people in these situations. Self-abandonment is not a compromise. It is quitting yourself so you can be loved by someone who lacks the capacity to do so, unless you are willing to carry all the burdens of the relationship. And the fact is, you deserve better. We are taught that loyalty means sticking by someone no matter what, right? It means having a person's back. It means showing up as a united front with people you're supposed to be loyal to. And this is most often family, spouses, partners, even friends, and in the workplace as well. I think any of you who know enough about narcissism already know where I'm going in this video. Now, in narcissistic systems, this virtue, if you will, of loyalty is unhealthy. I would even argue that it's dangerous. Now, because we are told loyalty is a virtue, there is often the assumption that more loyalty, and loyalty with conviction, the more loyalty, the better. More loyalty is always going to be better, right? And narcissistic relationships, narcissistic families is where loyalty goes to hell. So let's break that down. Now listen, in many families, loyalty means you stand by the family. You don't break ranks. You don't drop a proverbial dime on them. You stick together. In intimate relationships, loyalty is even built into vows, right? In richer or poorer, in sickness or health, in good times and bad. That's all about loyalty, right? You're supposed to stick around according to all those ups and downs, right? Loyalty. In a friendship, a loyal friend has your back. They might come back to you and say, listen, I heard something I think it's important for you to hear. They don't keep secrets. They don't make you look bad to other people. As a loyal employee, you stick with the company or institution or business. You may work harder during tough times. We're clear on what loyalty is. And I got to tell you, sounds like a great idea in theory. Especially when good people are loyal, it's good. We don't spend enough time talking about sort of the dynamics of loyalty, right? Because it really, done right, is a two-way street. You stick by the friend or the family or the business or the partner or the spouse. But what if they aren't loyal? At what point is loyalty on a one-way street self-harm? In narcissistic family systems, it's a mess. Because in a narcissistic family system, you are given the message that loyalty means that you endure anything that happens in the family. that being in a family means sticking together no matter what. That means that if you are the truth seer or the truth teller in a family system, or the scapegoat that has finally had it, or you're sick and tired of the gaslighting and the abuse and the harm, and you do speak out and you say enough, or you stop showing up, or you distance yourself, or you point out the toxic family members' patterns to maybe other people in the family or just to other people, or you share what a toxic family member said. More often than not, the person who speaks out, the person who breaks ranks, as it were, they're viewed as disloyal, because loyalty in narcissistic families means put up and shut up. It means staying silent in the face of the narcissistic abuse. It means letting the status quo remain and allowing the toxic person to run roughshod and for the enablers to remain enabling. The difficulty really arises if you view yourself as a loyal person, and you likely are, and you try to be that stand-up person, that person who does good by others and stick by them. It might be a core value for you. But loyalty is not meant to be masochism. Loyalty is not meant to be stand around and be taken advantage of. The problem is that loyalty is this sort of diffuse virtue that the toxic, controlling, narcissistic folks have really capitalized on this, because they use this concept of loyalty as a way to squeeze out and pressure the person who is trying to call attention to what is wrong in the system. And the further issue is that if you really do, if you're one of those people who holds loyalty as a core value or a defining characteristic of yourself or emblematic of integrity, and then you do speak out, you do say, listen, this isn't okay, and then you are called out as being disloyal, you may actually find yourself internalizing their criticism and wondering if maybe you are the problem, that maybe you are actually, God forbid, disloyal. You're a problematic person. After all, you may be the only one in that system that spoke out, the only one who is pointing out a parent's behavior as problematic or your sibling as being an issue. And when everyone in the family stares blankly back at you, even though at some level many of them know the truth, the person who tells the truth becomes the disloyal one in the narcissistic system. We see this happen in politics all the time, on all sides of the aisle, right? If someone speaks out against a corrupt political party, they're often seen as not being patriotic enough or as betraying their politics and the values of their party, that they have somehow been corrupted. We see this happen in institutional settings when the whistleblower is called out as not being a team player and is not being loyal to the mission and vision of the organization. We see this in marriages and long-term relationships, where when people are told that marriages are sacred unions, even when you're being betrayed every single day, and that you should not speak out against a spouse and be a united front. We still criticize people who speak out about what is happening in their toxic marriages publicly, as though they're disloyal for speaking about the harm they endured in a relationship. And listen, cults are some of the purest examples of narcissistic relationships, right? And they are founded and kept in place by this concept of unquestioned loyalty. That if you were a true believer, you would never speak out against the group or its founders or members. And since cults do their work through isolating people and gaslighting them, most people in these groups feel too confused or scared or alone to say something for a long time. They don't want to be disloyal to a group that they felt that they belonged to, that they may even believe saved them or changed them, or gave them things that they wanted or represent something that they believe in. Many people in spiritual and religious communities have been narcissistically abused by a religious leader or group, and that they're told and basically understand that to say anything meant that you were being disloyal to a higher power. It's tough to fight that. But we keep hitting people over the head with this idea of loyalty. and we've turned it into too simplistic a value. There is no place for loyalty with someone who behaves cruelly or manipulatively or abusively or dismissively or coercively. The word loyalty does not apply in these situations. Don't give me some BS about how toxicity is subjective. It's not. Any behavior, any conduct in a relationship that leaves people scared, unseen, unheard, invalidated, dismissed, minimized, that's toxic. And stepping away from that is not disloyal. It's self-salvation. Over and over, I have had people say to me that they didn't say anything about what happened in their families of origin. And this would be about anything ranging from repeated and violent abuse in all forms to emotional abuse to lies and betrayals that ran through the family. Narcissism flourishes when silence is reinforced. And folks in these families internalized the message that to speak out, to say anything, would be disloyal. And that family matters are private matters. And did you want to hurt everyone by talking badly about the family? Organizations of all kinds, from families to companies to governments to cults, always weaponize loyalty. They take what is often held up as a top-shelf virtue and use it to imprison the people being harmed by the perpetrations of these systems. I actually don't think we ever really talk about circumspect loyalty. We treat it as a black or white thing. You're either loyal or you're not. But loyalty, like respect, is something that should be earned. And that to be loyal to an abuser, that's not loyalty, it's fear. It's coercion. It's trauma bonding, but it's sure as hell not loyalty. Loyalty has to be a two-way street, engaged in by a person towards another person, group, or institution that has earned it and shows its loyalty back through how it treats the person within it. Listen, we live in a world where the narcissistic folks have taken this idea of loyalty and turned it into a tool of subjugation. And in that world, being disloyal, interestingly, may be the only way of saving yourself and ultimately being loyal to yourself and to the folks in your life who may actually be reciprocating and responsible recipients of that loyalty. Forgiveness is a really polarizing topic. Now, don't get me wrong. I am not anti-forgiveness. I know some of the virtues of forgiveness in healthy relationships. I think it can be a key space of growth. However, I see little to no virtue and in fact even some harm of forgiveness in narcissistic relationships. So some folks brought a little quote they saw on Instagram recently to my attention. And the quote was something like, forgiving a person who doesn't say sorry is strength, or that it's strong to forgive someone who doesn't say sorry. Is it? Yeah, drop that in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts. There was actually once a quote, I think attributed to Gandhi, that goes, "The weak can never forgive. Forgiveness is an attribute of the strong." So I think that this Instagram was really a riff off of Gandhi. I don't care how this quote is said. I don't agree. A narcissistic relationship is a lifetime or a decade or however how long the relationship goes of never really being apologized to or being apologized to in a BS way. I'm sorry you feel that way. If a person keeps forgiving that kind of thing, is that strong or is that just masochism? It takes the concept of forgiveness and it waters it down. It turns it into some performative divine action a person undertakes to make the world feel better to them. It enables a toxic person, and it keeps a sick status quo stuck where it is. All of this grandstanding around forgiveness, that somehow we are better if we forgive, is something I call forgiveness arrogance. Look how good I am. I forgave them. It's not so good. If the person being forgiven views that forgiveness as a permission to keep doing their bad things, we know that when you forgive a narcissistic person, not only does it not change their behavior, they also view it almost as a weakness, that you are the sucker that they can keep playing. Remaining stoic in the face of that, is that actually strength? I don't know about that. We make a big mistake in our society that enduring toxic behavior, cruelty, and meanness without flinching, without anger, frankly, without emotion, is somehow strong. It's not. It is a silencing of ourselves, a silencing of our authenticity, a silencing of our damn truth. I bet if I got the people who believe in that whack quote into a room, they'd say, "Oh, Dr. Ramani, we don't mean that. We mean that we can be better and try to understand the other person and forgive them because they are so lost." I know about that. Narcissistic people don't seem that lost. They know when to turn it on. They know when they can get away with stuff, how to manipulate, how to gaslight, how to get their way, how to intimidate other people, how to bully. That does not feel lost to me. It feels very calculated and cunning. The folks who champion a quote like this would say, "Oh, but we don't mean it if a person keeps doing this." You can't have exceptions in quotes. You're kind of all in on these things. But that's the thing. The people who don't say sorry, they keep not saying sorry. How long is a person supposed to keep enduring and forgiving so an Instagram quote can tell them that they're strong? For too long, people in toxic relationships have been told to put up and shut up, to not be so needy, to not ask for so much, to not expect respect, to make compromise, to be the bigger person, to be more realistic, to try and understand the other person's point of view. Enough. This has to stop. We have to stop forgiving people who keep harming us. We have to stop forgiving the people who never show empathy. We have to stop forgiving the people who keep saying mean and cruel and hurtful things and lie and deceive and gaslight and who don't apologize or apologize as a way of saving face. You don't have to leave the relationship. You don't have to call them out, but you sure as hell don't have to forgive them. You can radically accept that their meanness and their arrogance and their antagonism is who they are and make your decisions accordingly, but you don't need to forgive them. Why is it okay that in a narcissistic relationship, the world expects just one person to carry the empathy burden? I shouldn't even call it a burden, the empathy bag, I guess. Oh, but that's just how they are. They just speak their mind. They're just difficult. They don't have a filter. Somehow, we have become okay with one group of people who must forever be relegated to doing all of the compassionate and empathic heavy lifting for the narcissistic people who refuse to do it. Somehow we have become okay with it. This is why the world is the mess that it is right now. And here is where I really don't like quotes like this. It's not said, but it's implied in this quote. If forgiving someone who doesn't say sorry is strong, does that mean that not forgiving them is weak? I don't think I'm allowed to curse on YouTube, so let's just say F you. To endure these relationships while often being gaslighted by the world, to be eternally confused and guilty and ashamed and self-blaming, that, my friends, is strength. Getting up to fight another day when you walk through the world feeling not enough, like an imposter, and fighting against the internalized, invalidating voices that plague you every minute of the day, folks, That is strength. And finally recognizing the mess of a narcissistic relationship for what it is and saying, I am no longer forgiving this person. They never took accountability. They never took responsibility. They hurt me repeatedly. That is unforgivable. That realization, that is strength. The world is a mess because we keep forgiving transgressions that are unforgivable. We shame people who don't want to forgive after years of being harmed. We call them weak. You want to forgive someone who keeps hurting you, who never changes and never takes accountability and never apologizes? Then you do you. The Instagram solace of feeling strong, I promise you this, it's going to wear away really fast. But if you say something is not forgivable, what this person did was not okay, you don't have to run up to them and say, I don't forgive you. That's something you can carry internally. That is not weakness. It is deep, radical acceptance. And that, from my point of view, if you can do that, is the greatest strength of all. Narcissistic relationships are where trust really honestly goes to die. Because not only are narcissistic relationships inherently betrayal-laden spaces, the net result of this is a loss of trust. And it's not simple. It's not simply that we just lose our trust in one person. It's almost an existential loss of trust. And when we lose trust in such an all-encompassing manner, honestly, the simple day-to-day act of living becomes more difficult. Because in these relationships we are chronically doubted and silenced, because we are told we are wrong, what we're feeling is wrong, what we're asking for is excessive, what we need is selfish, all of this together means that we not only start buying into this distorted narrative about ourselves, we literally stop trusting ourselves. Because frankly, it's exhausting to keep trusting ourselves when the truth we are regularly being presented is at such odds with the trust we have in ourselves, if that makes sense. We're basically being told, don't trust yourself. But let's break down, because we lose trust in so many ways in these relationships. First of all, we lose trust in our instincts and our judgment. And this, to me, is the greatest loss of the narcissistic relationship. It separates us from our sense of ourselves and what we know and what we sense about the world. We stop believing in our instincts and we second guess them. And that's a shame, because the vast majority of survivors will recall that they had a bad vibe from the beginning with a narcissistic person they met, even early on. And the pressure of enablers and the world around them, the conviction of the narcissistic person that we are wrong, all of that mixed together means that we genuinely start believing that we are wrong about ourselves, wrong about all of it. We stop trusting ourselves. So we become more tentative about the decisions we make. We waffle when we have to make a choice. We hold back. We second guess ourselves. We ask other people for reassurance. And this can hurt us in a variety of ways in all areas of our life, in our other relationships and work, everywhere. Then, second thing we do is we lose trust in our abilities. Now, this relates to that first idea, but these relationships leave us feeling incompetent. You may be someone who you yourself knew you were very competent at what you knew from the beginning of the relationship. You knew what you knew. Perhaps you put it into practice in a job or at school. But over time, because the narcissistic person has such a need to be superior, it means that we start to doubt our abilities. You hear that you can't do something over and over again, or they say, let me do it. You don't know what you're doing. If you hear that enough times, we start to internalize this sense of our own incompetence. It's exhausting to have to keep proving yourself and to keep schooling another person on the idea that you can do something that you know you can do, but they keep telling you that you can't. The narcissistic relationship cannot tolerate you being competent. So the gaslighting kicks in, and before long, you don't even feel competent in doing basic things. Some folks will say, well, it's interesting because I'm able to go to work and I'm able to get things done competently, But then they'll say, after I got into the narcissistic relationship, I even doubted what I did at work in a way that they never doubted it before. Even though they don't work with the narcissistic person, it's just the doubt goes everywhere in our own competence. The third thing we lose is we lose trust in other people. When we lose trust in other people, it makes it very difficult for us to build support systems, to start friendships, to start new relationships. But why, after one of these relationships, frankly, would you trust anyone? Because it's interesting. Some folks, when they come out of narcissistic relationships, they sort of internalize all of that I am not enough, I am incompetent style of thought, and may actually have misplaced trust in people. Many people in narcissistic relationships believe other people know more or are better. If you get burned in these relationships enough, whatever narcissistic relationship it is, intimate relationship, friendship, family relationship, workplace, and you stop trusting other people, and it makes sense as a safety behavior, trust kept getting you into bad spots, betrayed and harmed, and over time, you stop trusting people. Another thing that happens is you lose trust in new people. It becomes an all or nothing. You just stop trusting everyone. It's an interesting strategy because this does keep you from getting close to anyone. And if you don't get close to anyone, then you can't really get betrayed. But then you don't get to experience close friendships or relationships or love even, which are kind of essential to healing. And that can mean that you simply aren't able to trust someone new. So even if you did meet someone who is decent or kind or nice, you may hold back, no matter how patient they are. And their patience may run out. But like I said, I totally get it. But it does hold you back. It holds you back at work. It holds you back in meeting new people and building new supports. And in a sick way, that means the narcissistic person wins because you don't get the empathic and supportive relationships that you need. Folks, I really get this one because if I was to do a personal itemization of one of the most profound impacts of narcissistic relationships on me, it's this. It's a complete and utter loss of trust in people. And it's sad because it means I don't always get to become as close to people as I hope. I keep people at an arm's length and I'm horribly inefficient, frankly, because I don't trust and I try to do everything myself. And it has hurt me. Then another thing we lose trust in is we lose trust in life. We lose trust in justice and in fairness. There's a suspiciousness that can pervade people who have been through narcissistic relationships. And since narcissistic relationships rarely end in a way that feels just or fair, it can really create this sense of a void, as though the things we were taught to believe in that are supposed to be bedrock beliefs, they are cut away. These relationships, narcissistic relationships, can take away the sense that working hard even matters or that being honest or having integrity matter at all, especially if the narcissistic people around you are continuing to succeed at work or succeed financially and you're continuing to struggle. And this can pervade us and fill us with a heaviness, a discomfort, and it doesn't feel good. This loss of trust in life itself can take some of the color, the poetry, and the magic out of life. And it can even take away our motivation and our drive to try. Trust takes so many forms. There's the trust we have for a parent, or at least hope we wanted to have for a parent. So the trust we have for a parent, the trust we have in an intimate relationship, the trust we have with an old friend, with a colleague. And these different breaches and betrayals of trust have different effects on us. The daily losses of trust that constitute the narcissistic relationship, the loss of trust that comes from not just betrayal, but from not being seen or heard or valued, that comes from being manipulated and from being relegated to simply being someone who fulfills the narcissistic person's needs with little regard for any needs of our own. It's a viral process. And before long, we stop trusting everything and everyone and ourselves. Can the trust come back? Yeah, it can, but not the way it once was. Probably not. It's a wiser trust, a more informed, more circumspect, more tentative trust. It takes way longer to form trust after a narcissistic relationship. The trust has to be heavily earned. It can be easily doubted. Frankly, I'll be honest with you though, the form of trust that matters the most is in yourself. Healing from narcissistic abuse is taking back yourself, your instincts, your intuition, knowing yourself and not doubting it. Once you get that slowly back, the other stuff becomes easier. But that is a slow process. And if someone gaslights you as you heal, it can put you several steps back. It can even be hard to trust the process. So just take it slow and recognize that your relationship with trust will change forever after a narcissistic relationship. It doesn't mean you'll never trust again, but it takes a long time. And when you get to that point, the first time you start trusting again after a narcissistic relationship, it can honestly be one of the most profound feelings you've ever had because it feels entirely different than the kind of trust you had before and certainly during the time you were in a narcissistic relationship. Thanks again.